Hey guys, welcome to our first ever Q&A video. We threw up a poll on YouTube and we had some questions from people on our Discord. Just generic questions about stuff that we think about, whatever. For some reason people care about that. So we decided that we were gonna compile all of these and just answer all of them, all 5 of us, interview style. As always, if you're interested in seeing more content like this, please subscribe to us on YouTube because, I mean, that's the best way to, you know, see more as it comes out. If you want to help us create this sort of thing, then you can always hit us up on Patreon. Every dollar counts and every dollar helps. It keeps the lights on. We have lots of them right now. If you donate to us, then we'll have even more. And at some point, it'll just look like we're filming the sun. So as always, thanks for tuning in and hope you enjoy our answers.
Well, it is Maynard Ferguson.
Is biopower a mod in the cEDH? There we go, biopower.
Some people would think it's biopower, considering he was our #1 first Patreon supporter. I'm gonna have to go with Maynard Ferguson on this one.
His content wrap-ups, those are great.
The content roundup that he does is super invaluable for content creators like us. We get that extra little boost.
Everything else he does is great.
It is Maynard Ferguson because that's the only one I know.
Maynard Ferguson. For president or something?
I am an insurance broker, and that is the most boring answer you're going to get, aside from James, I think. James's answer is much more boring.
I work for an insurance company. I guess you could call me a data analyst. I work with a team of software developers in India to create a computer program that's not going to break our existing data sets, because data is very important.
I currently help manage a local game store, and before that, I was a certified wine expert.
I'm a research farmer. I create data plots of soybeans and attempt to get the best data to breeders so I can make new varieties of soybeans a reality and feed the world.
I work at Dollarama.
I am maybe one of 2 people that runs a deck similar to my Najeela deck. It's very similar to a lot of the Najeela decks that exist already. The list as it is right now is fairly unique, and it's definitely weird and maybe suboptimal, but I like playing it.
Currently, Narumeha Master Wizard, Mono Blue, Ghostly Flicker, Infinite combo dealies.
The Circu Demir Lobotomist deck, that is the strangest deck I've ever played, and it was a lot of fun to play.
Probably my Tashana list I built. Basically just a creature ball into Lab Man win. Feels fun and sweet. You just play elves out.
I love Momir Vig Hackball so much. I think it's one of the best examples of creative deck building in cEDH, just because it's so different than everything else you see in the cEDH meta. It's not Ad Nauseam, it's not Razaketh, it's not Doomsday, it's not sort of any of the usual players. It's just something that's totally different, but it's still extremely effective.
I let everyone else decide that and I just vote yes or no.
We're gonna be upgrading the face cams.
We're gonna be trying to get hand cams into it.
We have 1 camcorder that we use for the overhead. We've actually got some plans to upgrade our 2 webcams that we use for the face cams. We're probably gonna be upgrading those to camcorders at some point as well, and then relegating the webcams to hand cams on the table. We've got a little bit of work to do on that, but for now, our setup is actually working quite well, I think. I'm currently working to learn how to do color grading, which I think is going to help improve the quality of the video that we're capturing right now.
We just want to make the best content that we can.
Singular.
There are so many lands. Maybe Gaia's Cradle?
Underground Sea.
Phyrexian Tower would have been my answer for the longest time back when I was playing Carador, for sure.
If I choose a basic land, do I have to say the artist on it?
Mountain.
I think Sarah's Sanctum is a great land. Obviously, it's not as good as Gaia's Cradle, it's not as good as Tolarian Academy, but it's still an incredibly good land.
I thought it was a shrimp at first.
Very.
If he's referring to the actual right arm emoji, then no, because the shrimp emoji is better.
I'm proud that I know how to use Discord. Discord came to me a little bit easier. I used MIRC back in the 90s and early 2000s. Emoticons, I don't know what they're called, are not something that I use too often. So I'm proud that I figured out how to do that bit. He's just so likable that you can't help but not like him.
There is hashtag Team Jerry, but if you'll notice, none of the spike feeders are part of Team Jerry. Not even Jerry, so.
Oof, too much to get into.
Because he's Jerry.
All around me are familiar faces.
Yes, but don't tell his girlfriend.
No.
Yes, because the plural of gym would be gyms.
I wish. Have you seen that man? No, unfortunately not.
I'm not single. I have a lovely and talented and intelligent and beautiful long-term girlfriend who I live with. She's been awesome through this whole thing. She's a woodworking teacher. She's helped us with a little bit of the stuff in the studio, along with decorating and a lot of good ideas for the channel.
Most of it.
Have you seen my luscious locks?
Feels so good.
I'll put my hat back on. Precisely $0.
0% for me, that's why I shaved it all off.
I would say it's a decent amount. It's maybe not allocated 100% evenly. It's definitely high on the Bill side and low on the Jan side.
It's worth it for this.
Me, Jerry, and Elliot kind of fall in the middle of the spectrum there.
Halle Berry.
I'm really hoping Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but if he's not available, then I guess Elliot will have to.
Steve Buscemi.
Liam Neeson.
It's got to be Matt LeBlanc, right? I mean, he got his own sitcom. Ultimately, that's going to fail because we all know that I'm the big draw for this show, and it's not Bill. So
When we first started the Spike Feeders, most of our energy was going towards just filming competitive content, and it was the only time we were playing was getting together to film these episodes.
editing these videos takes up just about all of my free time, so
Not as much as I'd like to,
A surprisingly small amount.
but that's just a combination of this and just busy schedule as is. But I try to get in at least a couple games a week.
I try to do it at least once a week, but more often than not, it's once every 2 to 3 weeks.
But we're working on it.
I actually sleeved up my Precon Lord Windgrace deck. I've been playing with a couple friends that I've actually introduced to the format. I've just been having a great time. It's specifically not cEDH, it's just casual, and I like it that way. It's a little bit segmented.
I will every once in a while get out to our local game store to play just a casual night on Wednesdays. I like playing casual decks. I have quite a few, so it's nice to just get out and play a game that we don't have to worry about tracking every single little rules thing, or tracking our life totals accurately or anything like that. I have a long list of content producers. I actually do talk to quite a few content producers. If I talk to you on a regular basis, I apologize if I missed you in this shout out. I love Jumbo Commander. I think him being on the command zone has been a real huge positive for them, just because he brings with him a different perspective, and I think that that's really healthy. But he's also a really positive force in the community. That's something that I value really highly, is people that keep things positive, people that promote positivity within the Magic community. I think that's something that we really need. Commander 99, Magical Hacker, Kitchen Table Commander. I love all these shows. If you just check me out on Twitter and see who I follow, it's a huge list of really talented content producers. Or come check us out on Discord if you want to share any kind of content, that kind of thing. Quest for the Jank Lord, check them out.
Channel Fireball, LSV, Andrea Mengucci, to put two, random names out there. Gabby Spart, Command Zone, Commander's Quarters, and Mudsta.
I don't actually consume all that much EDH content. I watch formats that I don't play. I watch LSV playing Sealed. I watch LSV playing anything. Day 9 playing Arena, because it's actually just super fun.
Nikachu and his channel, they're always fun to watch, and they do vlogs for events I'm at.
The Spike Feeders.
Non-Magic. I like the Try Guys. They're good.
It depends on what type of experience you're wanting.
I think it definitely depends what kind of mood you're in, and individual deck playstyle has a lot to contribute there.
I don't think it really matters for price point. As long as you build a deck that you want to pilot and have fun with it, it doesn't matter the power level, they're all going to be enjoyable.
I think that's really up to you how you enjoy to play. I mean, cEDH and casual play two different styles. So if you're playing budget cEDH, you're trying to do cEDH things less efficiently than you normally would. I enjoy both.
I actually don't think that casual or competitive, I don't think that they're better or worse than each other. I love playing casual and I love playing competitive, but for different reasons. It allows me to flex different deck building muscles. I get to do things in casual that I would never be able to do in cEDH, and I get to do things in cEDH that I would never get to do in casual. One of the big draws for Commander in general for me is the fact that you get to do whatever you want. There is such a wide open card pool that I think it's not necessary to choose, and it's not necessary to prioritize one over the other.
I own 3 cEDH decks, or I own 2 cEDH decks and 1 casual deck, with a couple that are proxied.
I currently have 9 or 10, but I'm like on my way to like 16, so.
16 to or 18, somewhere in that range.
7 and 2.
I'm only building things in paper that I typically never want to take apart. These are decks that have kind of established themselves in my gauntlet of decks as things that I want to play consistently. I think I've got probably 3 or 4 competitive decks put together in paper. and I'm gonna say 17 or 18 casual decks. I might want to revisit a couple decks that I did previously take apart, because this wasn't always my method. Yeah, I would say in total, 21 or 22 decks in total.
I don't think I'm ever taking apart Najeela. I think that's the only one that's going to be staying together, or at least some variation of it.
I don't think I'm ever going to take any of them apart at this point. I think every deck that I built in the past year or year and a half even has been very much for a purpose.
I don't want to take apart any of them. I just completely stopped taking apart EDH decks, because then I want to play them again.
It's harsh, but fair.
Correct.
You know, I think this is really valuable input. If it's in the budget for season 2, I think we could absolutely look at getting better personalities. It's definitely not out of the realm of reason. So we'll look at it.
You can proxy it, buy the cards slowly, and then eventually you have this beautiful EDH deck.
I think investing in a good land base is a solid place to start. That way, anything you end up doing doesn't feel underwhelming, and you don't get quite as discouraged as quickly.
Starting players need to find their own rhythm, their own play style before you can really build a deck for them. EDH is ultimately not the place to start finding your voice in Magic.
I actually do think that precons are a good starting point for starting EDH. They do have some issues, but they're really, as far as introductory products for new players to Commander, they are exceptional products. Obviously there's some that are better than others, but if you're looking to start, I don't think that $40 or $45 for a deck is unreasonable at all to break into a format that can be as expensive as Commander is.
Dual decks, or even the guild kits that they're coming out with now, are a great kind of intro strategy type situation where somebody can find out, hey, I like tokens, I like aggro, blah, 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 and go from there.
One of the major roadblocks that a lot of people have isn't necessarily budget, it's that they don't prioritize upgrades adequately. I think it's a really good idea to start with a budget deck, but I think it's a good idea to play decks that you're unfamiliar with to understand what makes them good.
Realistically, if you want to make a better deck, you just have to kind of look for inspiration for even just fun, powerful cards. Looking at powerful cards, seeing which ones call to you the most, and then trying to build, even if it's not 100%, go 50%, half measures are fine in this format.
I would definitely recommend, if you're starting out in the format and you're unfamiliar with maybe what you should be acquiring or when or in what priority, borrow people's decks. If you're part of a play group, ask if you can borrow people's decks. Talk to them about it. Engage people online and be receptive to their feedback. If they say, hey, your deck isn't really running very well because all of your lands enter the battlefield tapped, that's good feedback. Don't argue with them about it. Just think about whether it's appropriate and make changes if you have to.
That one's hard for me to answer because that's kind of how I started our group on the path to becoming more competitive anyway. I just found powerful cards and I liked playing them and I liked beating people with them.
The reason that we all got together is because we knew when we were sitting down to play cEDH that is what we were gonna do. We knew that maybe we weren't gonna be the ones that won, but we sure as hell were gonna try to be. We knew that everybody else was going to be doing the same kind of things. The term pub stomping,
I kind of was the pub stomper.
We'll get into that sometime. As long as everybody's on the same page, I don't think there's any room for feel bads.
Thankfully, my group was okay with it.
Be friendly, approachable, be open, talk to people, be like, hey, look, I really want to try out these more high-powered decks. Are you all interested?
Offer them a deck. Be like, hey, join us at this power level. You might not have a deck, but borrow one of ours.
Quite frequently, I find myself online when I'm reading content, there's this divide in the community between casual and competitive players, and I don't think it's necessary. When we put ourselves into those buckets, we create that us versus them mentality. It's really divisive. It's not a unifying mentality. Players don't have to be one or the other. There's room for everybody. It's a giant tent. Commander is a giant tent that everybody can be under. Really, all you need to do is just find a group of like-minded people that have similar motivations for playing the game. So in that sense, really what this series is, it's a demonstration to people that cEDH gameplay doesn't have to be antisocial. We're playing with people that like playing the way that we like playing.
Community issues, we're still working on that. I have no advice to give there. Deck building though, it all starts, just cut your ACMC. If you plug your list into tapped out or whatever, and your average converted mana cost is 6, you're probably not going to be casting very many spells, and then that could be why you're having a bad time.
Make smart plays, not necessarily like popular plays. Play solid magic, kind of learn interactions, good threat assessment, just like approaching the game as like playing the best way you can, and don't lean too hard on like all the table politics.
Go and consume as much EDH content as you possibly can. Brainstorm Brewery's MDTAS, My Deck Tickled the Sliver. This is a really good basis for thinking about your deck as functional packages. The idea is that each card in your deck should serve a specific role. I think they're really great. I don't think they're necessarily the be-all and end-all, but it definitely got me reading and watching more Commander content to think about and understand other people's ideas on deck building. It got me into reading other resources that aren't necessarily even Commander related, things like Who's the Beatdown. A lot of these concepts aren't necessarily totally applicable to Commander, but a lot of the essentials from them are applicable to Commander. Read up on card advantage, read up on tempo. All of these general concepts help you become a better deck builder. A lot of the best decks that you'll see in the format, these are decks that people have worked on for a lot of the time weeks or months or even years. They've been tuning these decks to do what they do. And you don't just stumble on that. So if you want to become a better deck builder, if you want to become more active in the community, if you want to understand how to make really, really interesting and fun decks, get out there and read. Get out there and watch videos. If you want recommendations, come and talk to me on Discord. I'll send you 100 articles.
Competitive, always there. He's got a soft spot somewhere in this pocket, I guess.
My favorite competitive deck is Yidris Storm.
Probably Brea and Tishana for competitive. Just fast, fun to play. You might lose, but you also might win.
Probably not a mystery, but I love this Bears and Cars deck that I've been playing on the series. Grand Arbiter, Augustin IV, Hate Bears, Shell. But we put the Hate Bears in vehicles and swing the vehicles at people to make sure that we can get in some damage without exposing the Hate Bears to combat. I sort of took a page from the Blood Pod side of things where, you know, if you've got an adequate beatdown plan, that can be a good enough clock provided you've locked down the board enough.
My favorite casual deck is my Edgar Markov deck. Just get to turn everything sideways and I don't have to pay attention.
Casual, I've been really liking. I have a Yuriko ninja deck that might make an appearance, but I've been having a lot of fun with that.
For casual, big mana Tassiger is just real fun when it goes off and you villainous well someone for their deck.
I built a deck recently, I call it 4-color Ether Lich. I wanted to play Lich effects. They spoiled Lich's Mastery and Dominaria. These are really awesome effects. They're notoriously difficult to build around. This deck's really weird. It's got a lot of really weird corner case rulings. You really have to understand replacement effects to understand how to play it well.
If you're worried about your deck being too powerful, the most effective way to mitigate feel-bads within your playgroup is just to say, hey, I built this deck so that it does X thing. Like if you communicate the win condition of your deck, it actually kind of tells a lot about the power level.
I use my Scouter.
As for when do you count something as cEDH, I think that's all about the strategy in general. Like I'm not going to show up to a casual table with a Labman deck. Basically ever, kind of.
When I think about cEDH decks, I think about decks that are designed to play well against cEDH decks. Now, a lot of people will tell you that it's like a turn 3 kind of a thing. Turn 3 gets thrown around a lot, and I think it gets misunderstood a lot. What turn 3 actually means, your deck has to be ready to do something by turn X in cEDH. When people talk about turn 3, that means you should be ready to try to win. You should be ready to stop people from trying to win. Or you should be ready to make plays that prevent people from trying to win. If I were to sit down at a table and say, I've got a cEDH deck, and by that I mean this is designed to play against other top-end competitive decks, I think that sends a pretty clear message to the people at the table. What kind of game are you playing? Are you trying to play against other cEDH decks? If so, bring a cEDH deck, and that's what you're playing. If you're not, if you're playing for some other reason other than playing against cEDH decks, then you're playing casual, and that's a huge spectrum.
Your deck becomes competitive when you become competitive. If you build an expensive deck and don't learn the lines, that doesn't increase your win percentage.
Competitive is more of a mindset than a deck itself.
Unless it's that much more powerful than the rest of your deck, and like the rest of the decks that you play against.
cEDH decks can be real janky when they're built on the side of the spectrum that's trying to counteract the cEDH meta. Blood Pod, for instance, is a really good example of a deck that would get stomped at a like regular casual table. I'm sure everybody's gonna tell the same story here.
I was drafting Dragon's Maze and pulled Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts. So I decided to make an Orzhov commander deck, then just started jamming good stuff cards, turned that into Carador. My playgroup lost a bunch, and now we're here.
Bill, James, and Elliot were playing Commander. I decided I would like to play this format. I lost every game because they had already started their arms race at that point.
One day, Bill showed up, and he was playing Cobblepot's Boonweaver Carador deck, and we just stopped winning games. So we were like, well, I guess we gotta do something. And then we worked our way to where we are now, I guess.
A friend of mine a long time ago told me I should try out this fun new format called EDH. So I took a very janky Boros deck that I played in high school at lunch for fun and just kept adding cards till I had 100.
I definitely started out playing casual Magic and then added competitive EDH to my repertoire, if you will. Bill and I started playing casual 60x4 Legacy, I guess you would call it, because we were playing with cards, whatever. I played a really fun artifact deck that bounced shield spheres and turned them into Blightsteel Colostopods. Bill started playing EDH. He said, hey, there's this new format, you gotta check it out. I ended up building this, stompy Vorel of the Hullclade +1/+1 counter manipulation deck, and I was hooked. It's an awesome format. Only within the last 2 to 3 years, I started playing a more competitive variety as our arms race kicked off.
I have a partner, and their name is Riley.
I don't think I make any mistakes.
I tend to wait too long to pull the trigger on interaction. I'll wait a turn too long for counter spells, or a couple spells too far for like a bounce spell or removal spell.
I get really flustered when I'm trying to win the game because I'm thinking through like 3 or 4 lines at a time. That leads to a lot of awkward things on camera, which you'll see in any of our videos that I'm in.
Way too greedy of a player. You show me a 1-land hand that has a cantrip, I'll show you a hand I keep. See Season 2, Episode 1. No. That hasn't been filmed yet.
Sometimes I forget to try to win the game. Sometimes when I'm sitting with tutors in my hand, I'm thinking about ways that I can shut down the other people at the table when the coast might be clear for me to try and win. It probably lowers my win rate by a not insignificant amount.
Honestly, try to convince the more competitive people to build more casual decks so that they're not trying to play down to your level and you're not also trying to play up to their level. Because if anybody's reaching in either direction, it just feels bad for whoever's reaching.
When you start getting towards the higher end of the budget, people sometimes I find it more difficult to power down. Their decks feel actively worse when they're not playing their Mana Crypt and their Demonic Tutor or whatever, but find better friends.
I don't think it's a lesson worth learning at the expense of burning players out. At the end of the day, if you don't have enough players to play, you're also not learning anything. Don't start conversations with, here's how I beat you, or here's why I won. Be like, why did you make this decision? Ask them questions about how they decided to play the game. Because sometimes you like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Communication, don't just beat your friends, scoop up your cards and be like, good game, jerks, and then walk off.
In our play group, just as a reference to this, I was easily the slowest one to get competitive Magic. One player is probably going to start the arms race, and it's kind of upsetting. I just wanted to play casual, but then I also wanted to win, which helped. There was a definite time I wanted to quit Magic, and don't quit, just beat your friends.
When I look at an EDH deck, I generally ask the questions, how does this deck win? How quickly does it start executing its game plan? And when you answer those 2 questions in combination, you can get a pretty good idea for how competitive it's going to be. You answer those questions by looking for win conditions, and then you look at the average converted mana cost and probably the land/mana base. In terms of how I would balance that, I would definitely advocate, if you have the financial means to do so, or if you're open to proxying, build a ton of decks. Like I said before, I have got 20-something decks. They range the entire power spectrum of EDH. If you end up playing against somebody that maybe doesn't have a ton of decks, you can lend them one. I think this is an extremely positive thing to do. I think it promotes inclusivity, because it acknowledges the fact that maybe not everybody is as fortunate as you, or not everybody is as experienced as you. But if they want to play at a particular power level, that they can do that without having to bring their own deck to the table.
My favorite guild is Simic. I love blue and I love green.
It's got to be Izzet through and through.
Ugh, is it? not close.
That shouldn't come as a shock given how much Izzet I actually play. Conceptually, the Izzet guild, when we talk about sort of unbounded creativity, because sometimes I just have these bouts of inspiration. I sort of get really, really into it for a short period of time, and then I go long periods without brewing until that next sort of spark of creativity hits.
Right now it's Dimir. It used to be Boros, which are like two opposite ends of, but it's who I am as a person.
So I love Grixis as a color combination, but Dimmer and Izzet really don't do it for me on their own individual parts. So I'm probably just gonna go with the Smash Face skill and just go Gruul, because man, do I love turning big shit sideways.
Absolutely not.
No, I don't think it's solved.
We're nowhere close to solving the format.
It's really tough to say anything concretely about cEDH.
There's just so many cards. There's too many cards and like too many interactions to go through.
I think we're working towards getting there for sure, but there's just so much good stuff going on. Who knows?
I think partners are good, but I definitely think there's a lot of places still to go. There's a lot of decks we've been seeing even recently from commanders that have been around a while that we're just now seeing potential come out of.
I think it probably speaks to the competitive deck building mindset in general more than the format being solved. cEDH tends to rely less on commanders and more on strategies. So if you look at the bulk of cEDH decks, and a lot of people have done this, you can divide them into archetypes so that aren't reliant on the commander. Blue-black X with either Isochron Scepter or Ad Nauseam. These are sort of major strategies that kind of have a core package of cards associated with them. And when people are brewing in cEDH, often they're looking for the best home to fit those strategies. I think that maybe people could stand to be a little bit more creative, acknowledging the fact that what they're building is maybe not the best, because we don't end up with good strategies without eliminating bad strategies from the running first.
It's kind of both. It's not exclusive to casual, it's not exclusive to competitive. Toxic players are kind of in every format, and it's tough to get away from those.
I actually think casual does. They can end up having a really bad time, losing to some kind of strategy that they feel salty about.
I actually don't think that the two communities are particularly different. I think that the cEDH community tends to solve the power level disparity problem that a lot of casual pods have. I think it's more a problem with people not communicating, and I think it's more of a problem with the Magic community in general.
I think differing power levels is what creates more toxic behaviors. It just depends on the individual's personalities who play at the game, competitive or casual.
James is currently the only one that has a Derevi deck together, and that one's Turbo Mill. It's actually a lot of fun to play.
Currently, no, I don't have a Derevi deck.
Oh, Season 1, Episode 6, Derevi Mill, your boy, forced Ferrucin into a... I won't finish that.
I do not. I never want to build a Derevi deck. I would much rather fly to the sun and burn on it and die rather than face that again. Thanks for the question, though.
I do have a Derevi deck. It actually uses Derevi's untap triggers to untap mill rocks. So things like Keening Stone, Millstone, Grindstone. We're tacking in with creatures that make you mill. That untaps the mill rocks, makes people mill more, and then it's got some bomby stuff too. It's a really fun deck. It's not great. It's really, really, really fun. I'll link that in the comments below too.
Depending on the deck, if it's blue, I try to just put the cheapest interaction as possible because most of my blue decks are designed to go fast. I'm not much of a control-y player. I just put the cheapest interaction, like Swan Song, Swords, Force of Will.
You get your Chain of Vapor and your Cyclonic Rift if you're a blue deck. Maybe Pongify, a Rapid Hybridization, Reality Shift. Swords, you gotta get Swords in there. It's the best 1-mana white spell in the game, probably. In terms of other interactions, cEDH is really nice because Nature's Claim, your opponent gaining 4 life doesn't matter, ever.
If you don't know what type of interaction to play when you're building the deck, go without it for a little while. Play the deck a couple times in a couple games, see what sorts of interaction hurt you the most, and then start finding slots for ways to deal with that sort of stuff.
I think that there's a multi-step process that you kind of have to go through when you're thinking about interaction.
I kind of ask myself, what deck am I playing? What am I likely to come up against? What sort of affects me?
First of all, you got to think about how fast your deck wants to win. Because if you're playing a deck that wants to win fastest, so I mean, I talked about who's the beatdown earlier. If your deck is the beatdown from a combo perspective, you're probably running less interaction in general, and you're definitely taking a hard skew towards things that are going to protect your combo. Things like Force of Will, things like Pact of Negation, maybe all the good 1 mana counter spells that are a little bit narrower.
Am I looking to do stuff on my turn and hold up interaction? Am I looking to just hold up interaction?
Siggy wrote a really good piece a little while ago called A Lexicon of cEDH Counter Magic. And I think that dividing counter magic into functional packages that way is really positive, and you can probably do the same with spot removal, board wipes, and the other types of interaction.
I tailor my interaction to the meta I'm playing.
Money has almost nothing to do with it, especially if you're talking about the axis of skill. More skilled players will win 100% of the time over less skilled players. Maybe not 100% because there is variance, but like there's a reason that LSV tops most of the tournaments he goes to, if not all of them, because he's just a more skilled player than most of the people he's playing against. Even if you're throwing money at it, if you don't know what your cards do, like most of the cards that we play in cEDH are tutors anyway. If you're searching your deck for something specific and you don't know what to search for, that's a really easy way to lose the game.
I think cEDH is very skill intensive. I think there's lots of intricate lines to take, and I don't think you can just throw money at that problem.
I don't believe money is necessarily a deciding factor on who's better. Skill has a great role to play in this. As you'll notice, a lot of our cEDH combos are quite skill intensive, and you need to understand the lines and how to play them. If you just know, like, you need these 3 cards to win, and you just be like, I have these 3 cards, now I win the game, you know, just ask your opponent, be like, okay, show me how you win. Because if you don't know how, and you don't have the skill to play the cards out, it doesn't matter how expensive the cards you're playing.
I don't think money is any indicator on your win rate in cEDH at all. A lot of it's based on little percentage points. Like, yeah, sure, if you have a Mana Crypt over a Warren Power Stone, you're gonna have a huge advantage. If you're a skilled player, you're absolutely gonna crush someone like me who just throws money at the game.
I think that one of the best things, one of the best pieces of knowledge that you can have in cEDH is knowledge of the meta. I don't mean any particular playgroups meta, I mean the greater meta. So I mean, when you see a commander, how accurately can you assess what they're trying to do? The more accurately you're able to try and predict what somebody's trying to do and how close they are to accomplishing their goals in a game, the better pilot you're going to be in cEDH. Money has nothing to do with that. You can go and learn about all the decks in the cEDH meta without spending a dime. Is a person with a Time Twister in their deck gonna do better than the person with the top 10 Mana Rocks? Probably not. Once you've got an accurate concept of the meta, I think that just by default makes you a better pilot.
This is a pretty touchy subject. In my opinion, not speaking for any of the other spike feeders, obviously, they're close enough to not being different formats that they don't need to be. In terms of the ban list, if a huge wave of bans towards like the fast mana and tutors happened, I think that might be the splitting point for sure. The cEDH subreddit wouldn't play that format.
One of the main draws to Commander is it's the format where it's, what do you want to do? Do whatever you want to do. If you want to build a Scarecrow deck, build a Scarecrow deck. The more you limit the card choices and the options, even if they are inherently powerful or inherently fast, the more uninviting the format becomes, the more restrictive the format becomes, and the less freedom deck builders have on the casual side. From competitive, I mean, they've been squeaking out like advantage out of old obscure cards for as long as we've been playing competitive Commander. So people will always still do that, and they'll always still find ways to play. Because it's not necessarily the style of deck playing, it's the approach you're taking to the game. People will always be trying to play the best they can, trying to play the most optimal they can versus trying to play the silliest, biggest things they can. I don't think banning cards like fast mana or tutors is going to necessarily affect them in a very positive way, and it's not going to get rid of cEDH.
I actually don't think that cEDH and EDH are different formats. I don't think that theme EDH and functional EDH are different formats either. Like Ladies Looking Left has a place in the format. Nobody would say that Ladies Looking Left isn't an EDH deck, or it isn't an EDH strategy, or it isn't a valid way to look at deck building in EDH. I think that the people that want to play those decks want to do it because they really can't do it in other formats. Doing something because you can't do it in other formats. When we talk about cEDH, these are people, and this is based on my experience with the people that I've played with, they're drawn to the format for different reasons as well. I think that they're drawn to the format because it's got a vintage card pool, but it doesn't have a vintage player pool. I can actually go to a commander night, and odds are I can find somebody to play cEDH with. But if I went to my LGS with a vintage deck, I just can't play that format, even if I've got the cards, even if I've got the knowledge of the meta, even if I've got, you know, the knowledge to build a vintage deck. Am I saying that, you know, all cEDH players are just vintage wannabes? No, absolutely not. EDH as a format allows cEDH players to do things that they couldn't do even in vintage.
I don't think banning cards is ever positive for casual play. Casual play is just the mindset. You're there to have fun. Some people literally just want to play their mind's dilation, sunbirds invocation as fast as they can, start dirtling. You take out mana rocks, those cards are gonna get worse, and then you're just gonna have mono green everywhere with Craterhoof behemoths. Is that what we want as a format?
Don't think I've ever heard of Polymorph Yidris before.
Polymorph Yidris sounds sweet. I've got a deck that uses Protean Hulk to get a whole bunch of 0-drops into play and then mass polymorph them into things like Tidespout Tyrant and Kozilek and all sorts of other fatties in the deck. I really like the idea, so I think it could be really cool. You see a lot of divergent transformation stuff going on in the cEDH community right now, so I definitely wouldn't rule out a Polymorph Yidris deck, but I would probably have to see it to make a really good judgment of where it's at right now in the meta.
I'd probably say Storm. Play spells, man. Aetherflux Reservoir someone for 50. Is it 50 or is it 40? It's 40. No, it's 50.
Storm, next question.
I originally started, as I said earlier, with an Obsidat deck, so it was just Orzhov value. I ran like Stoneforge Mystic and equipment and stuff in it. That sort of became fairly naturally Carador Boonweaver combo. I like graveyard-based strategies, I like creature-based strategies, and so I decided that, you know, I'd make something that was powerful but still revolved around that sort of thing. Being able to cast things from my graveyard every turn just felt sweet. I turned it into 5-color Boonweaver, which turned into Hulk when that got unbanned. The main thread between all of them was even the Orzhov one. It was all kind of based around creatures. I just really like creatures and how they interact. I like powerful effects on little dudes.
I think we all pretty much play the whole spectrum still, except for Bill, who plays only Najeela. I really like the more mid-range with a fast combo, but not as much control as Jim, for sure. I really liked playing Grixis Delver in Modern.
I read a couple articles and I started playing stacks, and then it was actually some of these guys that suggested I play more sort of like stacks effects in my pseudo stacks decks instead of like swords and other dumb artifacts. I enjoy Storm and a lot of combos like that has moving pieces and a lot of thinking kind of thing. I'm not a big fan of Doomsday, so that's why I kind of shy away more towards stacks or Storm.
I started in aggro and that was awful. Built stacks, realized I'm not a good stacks player. Built Brea, loved combo. Originally it was a World Gorger list and I love the idea of either I win or I lose. You ever have a Path to Exile resolve on your World Gorger trigger? I have, it's great.
Bill's kind of always been a combo player at heart. There was a time when he took a little bit of a hard skew into Hate Bears alongside his combo decks when he was playing Sliver Queen before Najeela. Bill has kind of been the instigator in the arms race. I've been the one that's kind of had to slow him down. If this is a really fast strategy, let's slow him down a little bit. What's the counterplay to that? That's really satisfying for me. So that's kind of how I ended up playing control stacks.
I don't think I started super competitive. I just played James's kitchen table decks that he had put together. There was a Mirror Tribal deck at one point. There was a Proliferate Tribal deck at one point that ran Chimeric Mass as one of the beat sticks. Playing casually was always super fun. I don't think I've always been super competitive, but I think I might be more competitive than the average casual player, if that makes sense.
Same answer as before. One day, Bill showed up with the big boy cards and we had to adapt or never win a game ever again. Personally, I came from Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was a young lad. Having the opportunity to play in more regular tournaments in varied formats that Magic offers, I definitely tried my darndest. Like, I definitely attended PPTQs and practiced my sealed game and all that.
I think we've all kind of been competitive because we just want to play sort of the best we can. It's good that we've all kind of evolved together as a play group. I think we've all had a bit of a competitive spark or a mean streak in some people's cases. Jerry.
Even in casual EDH, I would play to win, even though the decks really weren't that great. When I started actually getting into the cEDH mentality, would probably be when I first built Kalia. I just wanted to win, and I was like, I'm gonna win fast.
I think when Bill started to tune up his Obsidat deck is really when the arms race kicked off. We really only played with 3 or 4 people. Commander night at our local game store was typically a league, and we didn't really participate in it a ton. Once Bill started making those changes to his Obsidat deck, my Voral deck really wasn't able to keep up. So I actually ended up changing, going through quite a few different archetypes. I split my Voral deck into a Rune deck and a Kresh deck. Those really couldn't keep up either, so I kind of just kept churning through decks and churning through decks and churning through decks. And at that point, I landed on Nin. That was around the time when Tiny Leaders started. I looked up quite a bit of Brian Weissman's stuff. If you haven't checked out his channel, check it out. If you're a control player, it's got to be mandatory watching or mandatory homework. But he's an incredible control player. I emailed him actually asking for some feedback, saying, how do you take this to multiplayer? And he said, well, you can't really take it to multiplayer because of the way card advantage works. I took out all the pieces that were kind of only good in 1v1. Things like Amnesia that are absolute backbreakers in 1v1, but don't really do anything in multiplayer. That's kind of how I ended up with my Nin deck. But that's really at the point in my development as a player where I started to get more competitive, was that Brian Weissman turning point.
With the addition of partners, a lot of the issues for having specific effects in the command zone, I feel, have been shored up in a relatively boring way. The color combination that needs the most help is, quite honestly, Boros.
I think Boros needs the most help, but I don't think it'll ever get it.
I think Boros is the low-hanging fruit here.
I think Boros definitely needs a lot of work, just because you get outpaced with like the card advantage of like the drawing the cards and a lot of the counter spells.
Other decks and other strategies can be more averagely powerful. Instead of having a really strong game and then a really weak game, most decks like average out to about middle.
I think we need better fog commanders, like to slow these games down.
I think probably Pox would be my choosing. Free Braids.
Jeskai. Jeskai needs something artifacty, control-y, card advantage-y, good.
I would love to see a great Mardu deck. I would love to see a Jeskai commander, something with card advantage stapled to it. If there was a Jeskai commander that worked maybe slightly differently to Zedru, that gave the controller card advantage, I think that could be a really, really good shell for Blue Moon.
Yeah.
In casual, it's a little harder to get away with, especially the mass land destruction side of it, unless you're winning the game quickly afterwards, because it leads to pretty feel-bad situations if you just like Armageddon and then don't do anything for 12 turns.
If you're using them as a means to an end, where it's like you want to remove the other players from interacting with you while you're trying to do something, then yeah, go for it.
Competitive EDH, land destruction isn't even that big of a deal, because like everybody's just got so many rocks. I think like Vandal Blast is a lot more effective than Armageddon ever was.
I think mass land destruction is sorely missed in the casual side of things. You get so many ramp decks that play all the rampant gross Kodama's reaches and stuff and just fill their side of the board with lands. They need to be punished for this. We have answers to just about everything else that are widely accepted in the format.
Land destruction's fine if you plan to like win the game within a turn cycle or two. Just to like land destruction for the fun of it is, I mean, sure, yeah, you can do it, but like, hooray. Like, what did you really accomplish?
Land destruction's okay in the sense that it's like okay, but not good. Land destruction is kind of a tough one because I think it's a strategy kind of like group hug, where a lot of people misunderstand how to play it well. You can play land destruction for the sake of land destruction, just as you can play group hug for the sake of group hug. You're gonna end up either losing quite a bit or just pissing people off. I wrote an article about this a while ago. It was called Who Does This Benefit? It was all about asking that question while you're playing a game. Every time you take an action that might affect more than one player, you gotta think, who is it going to benefit? I think it can be played extremely effectively if you understand how card advantage works, if you understand what the goals are of the other decks at the table. I think that's something that's actually rarely done with land destruction because people do it poorly so often, it gets this stigma that people are playing it just to prolong the game. If people would ask that question more often, that you would see land destruction played more and you wouldn't see it with quite as much of a stigma around it.
When we released the Gitrog episode, the first one, somebody pointed out that my list was like pretty old, pretty not updated, and I've made a lot of changes to it since then, and it plays better than it ever has.
We read all the comments. We do think about what everyone's telling us. Pointing out our misplays, we appreciate it. It does help us be better. Keep the feedback coming.
Recently, I was talking to one of our patrons, Biopower. Biopower actually mentioned that after seeing me ping my Magus of the Moon with Nin the Pain Artist quite a few times to draw cards while everybody was locked down, he's asking me, why don't you play more creatures that have some sort of marginal benefit when they enter the battlefield, so that you can throw up blockers for Najeela and Najeela's tokens, and then ping them for damage and draw cards when you don't need them anymore. I'm looking at Loyal Apprentice, I'm looking at Voltaic Servant. I'm looking at things mostly with big booties that you know, can block Najeela or can threaten a trade with Najeela. I wasn't really used to thinking about building this deck with a lot of creatures.
Sometimes months.
Give me 12 minutes tops.
I don't know, 7 days. If I were to actually sit down and build a deck, probably about an hour or two.
It'll take me maybe a couple days before I'm actually ready to sit down at my local game store and play a game with it.
Elf Tribal?
Probably Stacks.
Stacks.
I really like the Stacks build of Yisan.
I used to own a Candelabra of Tawnos.
I would say the one that I regret the most is probably Candelabra of Tawnos.
It was in my original version of Doomsdayzer, and it was in the Kess, well, Jaleva Storm that I ported over to Kess when Kess came out.
I wanted to put together Jace Vryn's Prodigy High Tide.
I don't think I ever drew it. Never mind, was fiending to draw it, you know, like, oh, I could make this really sweet play if I had Candelabra.
I bought a Diabolic Intent the day before they spoiled the Battle Bond one.
Way back when I first joined Magic, I bought my first dual land for $70. I really regretted the decision. This is cardboard. What am I doing? Now looking back, it's like, woohoo! I don't think there's a single Magic card I've ever regretted purchasing now.
I know I mentioned that Aetherlich deck a little while ago. When I was at my local game store, they didn't have an unlimited one, which is what I was looking for. The owner of the local game store said, I don't have an unlimited one, but I have a beta one. I ended up dropping about $225 instead of the 70 that I was planning on. It's one of the centerpieces of the deck, so I love that it's beta.
I had a Borborygmos Enraged lands deck that was my pride and joy, and then I thought that we weren't gonna play casual anymore, so I took it apart. I had a Ruhan of the Fomori Big Guy Smash deck. I'll probably bring that one back.
I theory crafted a Sen Triplets deck because I loved the idea of Sen Triplets with Paradox Haze. We played 5 or 6 games with it, and I don't think I even came close to winning a single game. And I was like, there's a lot of fun stuff and cool things to do in this deck, but you just die too quickly.
I don't like fun.
Starting with some kind of point system can be helpful, but don't go too crazy with it.
Precons only. Any event that I've seen that has had sort of like the maximum amount of everyone having fun has been like precons only, or like precons plus $15 or some amount of budget. Other than that, figuring out the tournament math to like how many players per pod is a piece of cake. Anyone can do it.
Just set up pods of 4, 5 pods of 4, there you go. Wait, 30. Set up 6 pods of, no.
First, differentiate whether or not the people that are coming are expecting to have a competitive Commander tournament. If you just call it a Commander tournament, then people will show up with a huge spectrum of decks. Make sure that you focus on your messaging for the tournament. If it's going to be competitive, let people know, and let people know what competitive Commander means. I would encourage you to implement a really top-heavy prize structure to demonstrate the fact that only the first 2 or first 3 players are going to get prizes out of the 30. If it's a casual Commander tournament, implement a flat prize structure. Everybody's going to get the same prizing. You know, you might end up with 1 pack each and then an extra pack for the first overall. Something that's not financial, something like a trophy or something like a picture on your Instagram or a deck tech on your LGS's website or something like that.
Locust God. I was so pumped when that card got released. Not only did I not win a single game, I didn't do anything cool.
Sidisi Brood Tyrant. And now Jan's gonna go play it in this season premiere or whatever, and I'm mad about it. If it works, I'm mad about it.
Mishra has never quite worked out the way I want it to. It's either abysmally slow and no fun for everyone, or like I die right away and I do nothing. So I'm still working on it. I'm not gonna give up, but it's not going well.
I've played a lot of Marath. I haven't played a lot of Marath, but I've been trying to brew it for quite a while. I had a dream about Marath a little while ago. I actually dreamt that I went infinite with Food Chain, And when I discovered that it didn't, I already had about a third of the deck built. So that was kind of embarrassing, but I really do want to build a Marath deck. I just got so excited, but it doesn't actually end up working that way.
Homunculus is homunculi? Homunculi.
I love Pox and Death and Taxes in like Legacy and Modern. It's just so hard to build that in cEDH effectively. That would be one that's missing, and like if some cards are printed towards it, we could see some movement there and get better decks over there, but yeah, I think, yeah, Pox.
Tribal and aggro is missing from cEDH. You see a lot of like traditionally tribal commanders not actually doing tribal commander things in cEDH. I think we need to bring a Togs back. That's next set. It's going to be good. Ravnica, Tog, Legions.
I would love to see more control decks in the meta. You see Baral every once in a while, you see Rashmi. There was a phase where the cEDH online meta shifted really, really strongly towards control. There aren't really a whole lot of control decks relative to the number of combo decks. I think that games tend to be a whole lot more interesting when there's a pretty good mix of different archetypes at the table. A 4-player combo game is typically just a measure of how good your opening hand is in a lot of cases. That's part of the reason why I ended up playing a lot of control, is that I noticed that there really isn't a lot of it around. It tends to really suck to be the only control deck at the table against 3 combo players because you can't pin them down. But I think that if there was more control, if there was a little bit more stacks, or even if there was a little bit more mid-range combo, games tend to be a little bit more interesting.
I think that's kind of a misconception. The first part, at least from what Sheldon said, is kind of a misconception. There are games in cEDH that go on for an hour until somebody does something big and splashy and wins. It happens a little bit more in casual, but that's because the decks aren't, focused on doing one thing. They just kind of happen upon it. If the rules committee did ban most of the things that made competitive decks good, people might try giving the new ban list a shot and then realize that it's just not as fun because, at least for me, the fun part about competitive Commander is playing those really powerful old cards that they don't print anymore because they didn't know what they were thinking at the time. If that did happen, then I would probably either be part of the coalition to make a better ban list for competitive Commander. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
I think you'd probably have a pretty good split. I think there is probably a decent enough amount of people playing cEDH currently that if some crazy bannings happened would be fine, just powering down but still pub stomping or playing to that new ceiling of power level. But I also definitely think there would be a split into maybe not no ban list commander, but some secondary competitive format.
You all saw our season 1 episode 2. Did it look like we had fun at over an hour? No, I'm kidding. While I disagree that long games make for good games, I think that if we start banning more cards to make games take longer, I think it's just bad for everyone. Nobody wants to spend an hour and a half playing a game and you just like keep getting your board wrathed and you're like, all right, I'm out of stuff to do. There's a finite amount of fun to be had in a game of Magic the Gathering, and it gets to a point where you're no longer having any of it and you don't want to be playing it. cEDH isn't going to change much. We're going to keep playing it. It's how we play the game, not necessarily the decks we play. So even if we are switching to no band singleton vintage turn 2 combos again, we're still going to keep playing it. If we're like back to precons only with basic lands and no Soul Ring, we're still going to keep playing the way we play.
You'd probably just see what cEDH players have been doing ever since. Within the rules of the game, they'll just keep building the most powerful decks they can to try to win the game. It's all a mindset, right? We're going to win the game in this format. You're just going to see people do it in a different way. They'll find some random Odyssey card, break it, win the game. Commander's awesome.
I actually don't think that this is Sheldon Menery's goal. Based on what I've read, I think that a lot of people kind of mischaracterize Sheldon as hating higher power play, but based on what I read, I don't read that. I think Sheldon is very encouraging of people to self-regulate within their playgroup. I don't think that the Rules Committee's intent is to enforce these types of games on people. If you've watched our channel, you realize that a lot of our competitive games do go over an hour. Even the games that you see on our channel that are under an hour, we've probably cut out about 40% of the gameplay that you see. I think it's probably a mischaracterization of cEDH, but I can't really blame Sheldon. His stated objective is not to understand competitive or higher power gameplay. If Sheldon were to watch a little bit of cEDH, he might realize that that's not actually how games tend to play out. They can end very shortly, but I don't think in its current form that cEDH lends itself to that kind of gameplay. It might in certain metas, but definitely not in any of the metas that I've played against. I don't think it's really necessarily super helpful to play the what if game, and what if Sheldon is going to ban all of our favorite cards in the format? What if they're going to ban Ad Nauseam or Thrasios or any other boogeyman, reban Protean Hulk? I don't think it's super helpful to play that what if game, just because it tends to result in a really negative feedback loop about the Rules Committee. I think that their hands-off approach has been a good one, and I think that if they continue to take their hands-off approach, that the cEDH community is continuing to thrive. Now, I could be totally wrong about this, and in fact, if any of you on the Rules Committee, Toby, Elliott, Sheldon, if you want to reach out to me about this and talk to me about it, I would love to talk to you guys about this. If you want to come on our show, maybe we'll start a podcast if Sheldon Menery wants to join us on the show. But I have a lot of thoughts about the EDH community and the cEDH community. I definitely wouldn't mind getting their thoughts on it, but I don't think that that's what the Rules Committee is setting out to do.
All right, everybody, and that wraps up our first Q&A video. We're planning on doing these semi-regularly. As long as you guys have questions, we'll try to answer them. If you have any questions that really can't wait for another Q&A video, then you can always hit us up on Discord. We're willing to talk to basically whoever finds the link and shows up there. If you guys are interested in seeing more, then feel free to, again, subscribe to us, hit us up on Patreon, and we will see you next time. We have a couple interesting characters, this one included. So yeah.
Commander's just where it's at, man. Dude. My bros. Bro-sided, Lord of the Broshin. Me play good. If that happened.
Hi, Nigel. Hi, buddy.
Oh, you're coming over to see me?
That's okay.
You know what, let's keep this in. Hey, buddy.
How are you doing?
This is James's dog. He's an important member of the Spike Feeders, and we love him very, very much.
You here to join me? Okay, here, why don't you sit? You sit?
Are you okay with being on camera, Nigel? No? Okay.
You can hang out with me here. Okay.
His face is not in the shot.
Oh, it's just his butt. Okay, get off me. You're gonna stay here forever.
Thanks, friend.
Nigel.